Hey, Rick Sayes here. Welcome to Season 4 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, recording here at the subterranean Rimrock Studios outside of Bishop, California. I have another great season of interviews with retailers, brand managers, executives, athletes, and others in the outdoor biz to share their stories, tips, advice, productivity tricks, and hacks you can use to take your career or business to the next level. Today's podcast is brought to you by Creative Live. Start learning for free today with their amazing selection of on-air classes. With over 1,500 curated classes in photography and video, money and life, craft and maker, art and design, and music and audio, there's something for everyone. I've watched many of their on-air broadcasts for free, or buy a class and own the content for life. Go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/creativelive and start building creative skills from the world's top experts today. Hey, I'm excited to catch up with Ammi Borenstein on the show today. Ammi and I worked together at K2 a few years ago. Ammi tells us about his time with K2 and outdoor research and the work he's done and is doing to help brands navigate the Higg index in light of REI's new requirements for brands to show their scores. We also discuss what the Higg index is and how it came about. Enjoy. Hey, Ammi, welcome to the show.
Hey, Rick. Thank you very much. How are you?
Yeah, good. Good to be chatting with you. Glad you reached out. We caught up. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been, probably 15, 20 years maybe since we were at K2 together?
Yeah, I think about 15 years. Hard to believe. Time flies when you're having fun, I suppose.
I guess that's right. So I always ask guests, what's your first exposure to the outdoors? How'd you get into the outdoors?
So I grew up in New England, and I grew up in a family that really wasn't much of an outdoor family, but the little bit of exposure I had to the outdoors told me that I just absolutely loved it. And so right after college, I bought a one-way ticket to Seattle, and I have yet to buy the other half back.
Nice. Awesome.
Yeah. So I moved out here and quickly just evolved to spending as much time as I could up in the mountains, and did a bunch of hiking, backpacking, mountaineering, rock climbing, and a fair amount of paddling because the Great Northwest.
Oh, I didn't know you were a paddler. Awesome. Cool.
Yeah. And back then, a weekday ticket at a place like Crystal Mountain was about $12 instead of the $100 that it is now. And there was a huge amount of opportunity to get out and have some fun. And back then, my version of slopeside accommodations was camping out in the Crystal Mountain parking lot. So
dirtbagging it like we all did.
Exactly.
We all did it. So what was your first outdoor job?
So when I was dirtbagging in the Crystal parking lot, I needed a job to support my habit, I like to say.
Right.
And so I got a job at the North Face store here in Seattle, working for a guy named Paul McKinley, who was a store manager. And crazy enough, all these years later, Paul, I think, is now the longest tenured employee at the North Face. But it was great working for Paul because he really showed me that you could have a career in the outdoor industry and actually turn it into a career.
Oh, cool.
So that whet my appetite for more than what I could do in the retail store. And I kind of pretty quickly figured out that I'm a complete gearhead and even started making some of my own gear. I would buy products at REI, take them apart, re-engineer them and rebuild them. And so I looked for other jobs that I could get in the industry, and not being qualified for much, I ended up actually getting a job at Rainy Pass Repair, which was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I know those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, it was super interesting because I got to see some of the mistakes that people made in designing gear, whether it was how it went together or wrong materials. And I also got to see how people would wear out their products.
Oh, right. So you saw all the wear points, stress points, all that stuff.
You got it. And so that was really a fantastic education for where I ended up in my career. And so, some of the things I learned there was, don't use any other zipper than YKK. I mean, it just that was a non-YKK zippers were a bit of a profit center for those guys. But
that's good. That's good.
Yeah. So after doing that for a little while, I again kind of wanted more. And so I got an apparel design degree. And then I was actually qualified to work in-house. And so that opened a lot of doors for me. So
Where'd you get your degree?
I got it at Seattle Central College here.
Okay.
It was just a 2-year apparel design program.
Yep.
And it was, really gave me a leg up. And amazingly enough, my first job right out of school was at K2, where you and I met.
Oh, wow. Cool. I didn't realize that.
Yeah. So they took a huge chance on me at the time, but it ended up working out incredibly well. I was there for about 6 years. And
I was going to say, you were there a lot longer than I was.
Yeah. And as you remember, took that ferry to Vashon every single morning.
Yep. I'll never forget that ferry.
Yep. And what was just incredible was seeing that factory.
Right.
And being in that environment, 600-person factory. I don't know if it was still there when you got there, but
it was not. I got there just after they shut that down. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's too bad. But we had, just an incredible round of equipment that had been invented there. So things like, you probably heard about that triaxial braiding machine, that braided the glass around the core, and carousel heat presses. And so, for me, it was just nirvana, because here I was designing, developing, sourcing products all over the globe, and getting to spend as much time as I wanted seeing how a factory operates and learning how to move product through a manufacturing environment. So it was just absolutely incredible. And just funny things, memories from that time. We had a freezer, a shipping container that was retrofitted as a freezer out back.
I think I remember that.
Yeah. And they would use it to actually break skis and snowboards in extreme cold. Yeah. To see how they'd react to all these different tests. So, just super fun stuff. We'd, suit up in our down jackets and gloves and beanies to head in and go break skis in half.
Right. So, yeah. So we were at the Dana Design Crowd. We were in one of those rooms where they made all those skis. Remember they had the snowboard rooms and all that. Yeah. So that stuff was long gone. You can only imagine what went on in those rooms before we got there.
Yeah. I think you guys were actually in the room that had that triaxial braider.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Crazy enough.
And so what'd you do after that?
Well,
after K2, you were there a long time.
Yeah, so it was just a huge experience there. So the nice thing about that role was it was an absolute crash course in all the things I didn't know. Things like product development, sourcing, logistics, and kind of how to run a business. Because if you remember, K2 was and really still is a hard goods brand.
Right. Yeah.
And you and I were slugging it out in the corners trying to get these soft goods collections up and running.
Right.
So I felt like it gave me a real foundation in how to operate a small business, and not to mention, having heli skiing as part of my job wasn't too bad.
Nice advantage. Nice little perk.
Yes, indeed. And so, so after that, moved on to outdoor research, which was a really, really interesting and really transitional time to be at OR. Because I think you remember Ron Gregg, who was the owner, founder, and a real outdoor industry icon.
Yeah.
He died in an avalanche in 2003.
Right.
And then Dan Nordstrom bought the business from Ron's estate, and then I joined the company in 2004, and it was an interesting time. And
I'll bet.
And I actually had been friends with Ron.
Oh wow!
And he had actually offered me a job about a year earlier, and it just didn't work out at that time. But so it was an interesting time. It was a challenging time. It was a very, very dynamic time for the business.
Yeah, and how long did you end up there? You were there for a bit of time, not as long as K2. I don't think.
Well, I actually ended up at OR for 12 years.
Oh, okay, okay, got you.
Yeah, long time. and it was, really, kind of the way I had the experience of having this sort of little, what I think of as an entrepreneurial role at K2. At OR, we were, one of the last of the independent companies.
Right.
We had everything contained in one building. And so it had a lot of that same really authentic outdoor feeling. I mean, we had first floor was retail store, which you've probably been
many
to.
times.
A lot of people. Yeah, indeed. And then above that we had warehouse, and top floor we had, our product development, sales, marketing, and everything in the middle floors was actually one of the last great, apparel and accessory factories in the United States. Still there, still operating.
Wow, I didn't realize it was still there. Yeah, I remember that. I interviewed with those guys a long time ago when I was still at Eagle Creek, years and years ago. Yeah. So I got the whole tour there. And then when we were, we used to run, when I was at Dana Design, there was a group that operated up there, and we got all the manufacturers together and flew buyers in. So we'd tour them around. It was Ex Officio, Dana Design, OR. I forget who the third one was, or fourth one, but yeah. So we'd go have meetings at everybody's facility, and then we'd go back and have dinners and stuff. It was cool. It went on for years, and I'm
That's
sure,
great.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. People got a big bang out of it.
That was probably before my time there, I think.
Before you were probably still at K2 then, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that factory these days is dedicated to military production.
Right.
But it's still there, still operating, and really kind of in many ways at that point in particular was a key component of the brand legacy. It was really an exciting time, very dynamic time. And Dan was on-site CEO, super active, committed athlete, committed to the business, and we built a really, really strong team and expanded the product lines significantly, grew the assortment, and actually ramped up sales, marketing, and ended up over my time there, we generated incredible growth, and honestly, not just me, but a pretty talented team.
Yeah, overall. you guys had a lot of talent there. I think Mahoney was there, a sales guy, wasn't he?
Mahoney was there.
Right,
Alex Scutchus was there.
Right.
Clark Campbell, Jordan Wand. I mean, a lot of folks who well known in the industry, and Charlie Losner, across marketing and product and sales. And then of course Dan as well. So
good group.
Yeah, really, really great group, and 12 years is
it's a long time.
Yeah, it's a couple of lifetimes in this industry. And,
That's right.
So
I was going to say, so let me give a quick shout out to Cascade and MSR. That was the other group that was part of that 4-person group.
Oh yeah, that's right.
But so what are you working on now? How long have you been?
So now what I'm doing is after all my time spent in-house in the industry, I decided to start a company called Snaplink Consulting.
Okay.
And what I'm doing is consulting across a range of functions within, largely product development, sourcing, logistics, kind of my core competencies. But one of the other core competencies that I developed while at OR was sustainability management. And so really one of the biggest things I'm working on at Snaplink is actually sustainability consulting.
Oh, okay.
For a number of outdoor brands, and even that gets a little more laser focused with consulting on the Higg index.
Gotcha.
And that's driven primarily by some of the urgency created by the REI sustainability standards. Yeah, and so while I was at OR, some of the things I did. Manage the in-house sustainability programs, but also I was on the first executive committee of the first OIA sustainability working group.
Okay.
Back in 2007.
So you were there when the Higg index got created, pretty much.
Yeah, gotcha. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and back then it was called the OIA Eco Index, and it's evolved substantially since then, with a tremendous amount of input from some of the work that Nike did, and then a real team of global experts brought into the Sustainable Apparel Coalition to manage it.
And for listeners who might not know much about the Higg index, give a quick overview of that.
Yeah, so the Higg index is a pretty significant, robust set of tools. There are about 6 pieces in there. And as I mentioned, one of the pieces being driven most actively by the REI sustainability requirements, and that's the Higg brand and retail module.
Okay.
And so that's the one. There are facilities oriented tools that
There's
are
like
actually
6 modules, I think you were saying.
yeah, 6 modules
Okay.
altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So last year in April, REI released their sustainability standards, product sustainability standards version 1.0.
Okay.
And it's on their site if anybody wants to, any of your listeners want
We'll
to go
put a
look
link
at it.
Yeah, we'll link to that in the show notes. Yeah. And the
Yeah, that's
Higg
great.
index as well. Yeah, everybody can follow up on the show notes. Cool.
Yeah, great. And so they articulated a whole series of concrete brand expectations, as well as what they call preferred attributes. And the expectations they require and the preferred attributes are really desired.
Gotcha.
And among those required expectations are things that most brands will be able to do pretty readily, and in many cases are already doing, things like elimination of BPA if you're making water bottles, or elimination of toxic flame retardant chemicals from temps.
And they're requiring this across all categories or only select categories?
So the product sustainability standards apply to every vendor to REI.
Okay. Wow.
But each different standard within the larger body of standards applies to different aspects. So
Gotcha.
The BPA elimination applies to plastic food contact.
Yeah.
Products.
The power bar guys aren't gonna have to worry about that.
Yeah, exactly. And
I don't think.
Yeah, hope not.
Yeah, right.
And like I said, I mean, things like toxic flame retardant chemicals, any tent brand that sells at REI has almost certainly phased those out years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of those things are really smart for them to document, but aren't going to be a heavy lift for
right. So some of the things that
that
have already been worked on or done, now it's all the new requirements, and so that's going to create some pretty significant implications for vendors. What's that going to be like?
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. It's going to be significant implications for sure. So I think, zooming out, I think the broad implications are that this is really the first giant, consistent, measured push forward for the outdoor industry.
Okay.
Many brands, as we all know, have made fantastically good strides forward with regard to sustainability, but it's fairly inconsistent in terms of how we measure it, how we talk about it, how we even determine if an action taken by a brand in the outdoor industry is actually relevant.
Right.
I mean, a lot of what's done sounds good from a marketing standpoint, but may not be the best thing, or may not be terribly meaningful environmentally. And so, yeah, exactly. So as you know, I mean, we're not an industry that does well with standards. We have a million things that say waterproof in every retail environment imaginable, and we actually don't have a consistent measurement.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some things we are pretty right and tight on, but you're right. Other things we're fairly loose. Yeah, yeah. Like some of the guiding things are pretty locked in, but
yes, definitely.
Yeah, some of the product related things are pretty loose.
Yeah. So for an industry that is not universally accustomed to having a series of standards to adhere to, I mean, I think this is going to be probably the biggest implication is it's going to be a mindset shift from that standpoint. And the other thing is that, as I mentioned, some of the expectations or required expectations are going to be very achievable, but some of them are going to be hard. And
do you think REI will lose some vendors? Their vendor list will shrink because of this, just till they get their things all buttoned up?
Yeah, I that's a really fantastic question. I mean, it's hard to know because obviously each brand has to make an appropriate business decision about the amount of work required versus the amount of business they do with REI. I mean, we know that for many brands on that outdoor retailer show floor, REI remains their biggest customer.
Right.
And so I think for a lot of those brands, they'll have to step through these hoops. And having spent time working with brands on these specific hoops, what I would say is it's hard, but not unachievable, not impossible, not anything that can't be done. But it's hard work. But I mean, good progress on sustainability in, I think, any industry at this point is hard work.
It's hard work, but it's critical. I mean, it's if we're gonna have a planet, and that for my niece and nephew, we better get on it. So So how have you been helping brands? What have you been doing so far?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, a big part of what I've been focused on has been that Higg brand and retail module, and that's probably the biggest lift for many of the brands that will have to adhere to these standards. Well, for all of the brands.
Right.
So REI is requiring the Higg BRM, the brand and retail module, for all apparel and footwear brands. They're requiring that they complete the BRM and actually share their scores with REI. So it's pretty interesting. And so what I'm doing is working with brands to help them really break down the Higg and move through it in a way that's done in a pretty organized fashion. So the Higg brand and retail module has about over 500 questions.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a pretty big deal. And to say the least. And those 500 questions are divided across 16 sections.
Wow.
And it's essentially 8 main sections. And those 8 sections are things like product development, sourcing, distribution, retail environment. And then with each of those sections, there's an environmental component and a social component. So one of the things that actually is great is we, as an industry, we spend a lot of time talking about environment and some time and decent amount of time talking about social. And what's great about the Higg BRM is actually it didn't leave social behind.
Yeah, that's good that they left that in there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we know that as an industry, we indirectly employ tens of thousands of low-wage workers.
Right.
And so, as we all know, it's really, really critical to make sure that those workers are operating in an environment that's safe, that's healthy, that pays a living wage, doesn't employ children. And so, so it's really, really important that the Higg also covers that social component, which they also do in a different module that brands are not accountable for, but suppliers.
Oh, right. Okay.
Two brands are starting to become accountable for, but we'll save that one for a different podcast.
So how much of your work is spent helping brands understand all these complexities versus helping brands start to implement and execute some of these things?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. So 500 questions in the Higg.
Yeah.
471-page supporting documentation. So typically what I'm doing, and the estimate is about 160 hours, up to 160 hours to complete it. So the irony is that's a big lift, but that, I think, you just hit the nail on the head.
And across all departments. I mean, you have to get your designers, your developers, your product managers. I mean, there's the factories. There's a lot of folks that have to get their head around all that stuff.
That's right. And I think your last question really hit the nail on the head. That's only the starting point. Which is exciting in many ways. And so what I've done so far is actually helped a few brands complete the Higg BRM, which has, I think, really helped them keep their teams focused on their core deliverables.
So at this point, is it just to complete the questionnaire and share your score? They're not requiring you to actually raise your score or improve anything at this point? They just want to know what the current status is?
Yeah, so the exact wording is REI will expect each brand partner in the apparel and footwear categories to complete the Higg Index brand module annually and share their results with REI.
Gotcha. So conceivably, you could complete the module the first time out and have a horrible scores, do a bunch of work internally to get that all, fixed, and then the next year you complete it again and your scores have gone up by 50% or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's exactly right. Okay. Probably not 50%.
But
you got it. And what's been great about the Higg is because it's a rigorous, vetted process that's highly standardized, is you can pretty quickly in an organization see where the opportunities are to improve environmental and social sustainability.
Right. And I would think it'd be pretty easy to get lost in the weeds though also? I mean, you really have to pick your spots. You have to look at those things and say, okay, these 10 things are easy. These 10 things are important, but not as easy. Let's not get tied up in those yet. Let's go to the easy lifts first.
Yeah, well, so they did a great job in the Higg in that generally the easy stuff has lower point value.
Oh, okay.
So I think you're absolutely right. Brands are going to have to decide probably the first and most important lens that they'll have to use is what is most meaningful to them.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they decide it based on sort of easy versus hard, I don't think that's the right way to approach it. I think it's what matters.
Mm-hmm.
And the great part is we now have this standardized way to analyze and talk about as an industry what matters to us as an industry, to any individual, within a brand or brand leader, to be able to determine what matters most to them and move forward based on that. And so, so
I was going to say, and that I had a question in here too about future trends. So that's also going to be impacted by trends in the industry, right? As we move away from certain fabrics and towards different materials and things, that'll change as we go. How's that going to impact the next 5 to 10 years, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think what's clear is people will slowly and steadily over the next 5 to 10 years begin to improve their overall environmental and social profiles.
And we've seen that happen already. That's already
absolutely
happening.
Yeah. That's a steady march for the last really 20 years by some of the leaders in the industry and by many people following behind. But now we all move to a more level playing field, and so it makes it easier to measure the advancements, but it also makes it harder to make claims that may not be fully validated by a measurement tool like the Higg index. And honestly, I think what we know is that our consumers are begging for it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're gravitating towards brands.
They're demanding
it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Demanding it. Thank you. Much better term. And we also, I mean, the other thing is we see that whole fast follower effect. I mean, you see stuff show up at the trade show and then the knockoffs end up being for sale on Amazon before the product gets delivered to retail. And so we know that those knockoffs, they're low quality, first of all, but they're not made with any environmental or social standards. And anybody paying attention, ideally, is going to walk away from those knockoffs and look to an industry, and particularly look to individual brands that are leading and driving these sustainability standards and improving year by year. So I think the fast follower effect is obviously problematic right now in the industry. And I think this is a really, really critical, using these REI sustainability standards, using the Higg BRM, and of course, good design and advancement in materials and et cetera, but particularly using these environmental and social enhancements is a real opportunity for our industry to differentiate from everything else that's out there.
So here's a wild card question that was not on my list, but one thing that I've been talking with other folks about, haven't addressed it on the podcast yet, but do you think that this is going to impact the volume and availability of product in any significant way? Because I think we've lost sight of some of the scarcity that we used to create when we were a brand new industry, right? I mean, when this industry first started, if you didn't get the first season such and such jacket, you didn't get the jacket. It was just sold out. And now it seems that we produce so much that there's no scarcity. You can get the jacket, as soon as it comes out if you absolutely has to have it, or you can wait until the end of the season or the next season and get it on sale. There's plenty of them that were made. Is this going to cause brands to look at that at all, you think, or they're just still going to apply it across the board and make thousands?
Yeah, well, I think one of the trends that's happened alongside that is brands have moved to more, in many cases, obviously not all, have moved to core styles lasting for more years.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because I think people are realizing that if you get a style right and you build it as core to your offering, the opportunity is to actually minimize the changes,
Right.
minimize the required discounts, and carry it forward year by year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And actually, in many ways, you can refine the garment without the customer even
Yeah,
knowing.
you make little tweaks and you offer it in a couple different colorways. Porcelain
Yeah.
colorway goes away. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And from an environmental standpoint, that's a great way to operate because you can get more efficient on fabric usage.
Right.
You
Mm-hmm.
can
Right.
get you can get more efficient on your manufacturing methods,
Right.
and you can begin to reduce the impact of that product. So I do think, we're still seeing just a fantastically breakneck pace of innovation
Yeah.
across our industry, which is great. That's what
Mm-hmm.
makes it exciting and fun.
Right.
But I also think if you look across brands, which obviously nobody puts press releases out about, you're seeing more consistency in offering year over year. So
Okay.
it's
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of the top tier that people are now, as always, but people are featuring in their press releases,
Mm-hmm.
and but still building these very, very long-term consistent styles, which I think sort of indirectly solves the problem you're talking about with how many units get created. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
if you can sit it in the warehouse, it's obviously not ideal to finance it in the off season.
Right.
But if you can sit it in the warehouse instead of deeply discounting it and getting it on Sierra Trading Post, I mean, that's a huge value to everybody
Right.
involved.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe not the consumer, but yeah.
Yeah.
They're always looking
Yeah,
for a deal.
exactly. Yeah.
So, before we move on, is there anything else that you think is any other ways this is going to impact the industry or brands, retailers?
Well,
Are other retailers following suit yet?
so MEC, I think, is making noises about potentially following suit
Mm-hmm.
behind REI. It'll
Mm-hmm.
be interesting to see if any other retailers do follow. I mean, REI is uniquely positioned, as we know,
Yeah.
in our
Right.
industry,
Yeah.
and so we'll see where it goes from here. I would suspect MEC will follow suit, and after that, it's kind of hard to see another retailer, maybe Backcountry.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say
Um,
backcountry. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, could. But it's hard to see because it definitely could compel a retailer to drop a high performing brand, or cut back on a high performing brand. Not that REI has said they're going to do that. I don't want to misspeak there,
Yeah. Right.
but
No. Yeah. Right. Right.
but yeah, I think it could have an impact on a business that a company that's not a co-op
Yeah.
might have difficulty with.
Yeah. They have to choose
But
their spots. Yeah.
yeah, but I think broadly, the exciting thing to me is that these things are, particularly environmental and social sustainability, are things that you walk that show aisle, there's not a person at that show, or mostly,
Yeah.
who would not want to see our industry move forward.
Yeah.
And so what's exciting is that sentiment has been there for a long time, but
Mm-hmm.
there haven't always been clear paths and
Mm-hmm.
clear tools to allow brands big and small to move forward. And what's exciting about these sustainability standards is they begin to codify and provide structure around those enhancements that are very, very meaningful.
Yeah, and like many things over the years, the outdoor industry is leading the way, and as we've seen in the recent elections, a lot of these things are becoming more and more mainstream. And as REI and brands continue to follow these requirements, hopefully those will then become mainstream, and finally we'll get this that commitment to big oil turned around. So
Yeah, exactly. That would be nice.
Yeah, right. Let's go on to some lighter stuff.
There we go.
What other outdoor activities do you still participate in? I'm sure you're still a winter sports guy.
Yeah, I still love winter sports, and in the non-winter season, hiking, backpacking, still get out, do as much paddling as I can.
Cool.
So, yeah, it's being in the Pacific Northwest, everything is barely arm's length to
Yeah,
get,
exactly. It's right. It's your
to the
backyard.
mountains,
Yeah.
to the water,
Yeah.
and still try to do that as much as possible.
Cool. Do you have any suggestions or advice for someone either wanting to get into the industry or maybe, grow their career if they're already in the industry?
Yeah. I mean, and that's a great question because we all started somewhere.
Yeah, right.
So based on my experience, my really number one piece of advice for people looking to get in the outdoor industry is focus.
Mm-hmm.
Because you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I love the outdoor industry. I want to be a part of the outdoor industry. How do I get into the outdoor industry?" But when you really break it down, there are a lot of vastly different roles. I mean, you and I have had different roles over the years. Yours has been, more sales oriented. Mine's been focused on product. There's marketing, there's finance, there's logistics, sourcing, distribution, retail. And so I tell people, focus, decide what part of the industry you like. If it's product, then great. That opens up one whole set of, training and direction and opportunities that you can take. If it's marketing, well, that's really a whole different path. It might be at the same company, but it's a vastly different skill set. So I really tell people, it's a great industry. It's super exciting. It's tons of fun. Focus.
That's
And that
good.
that just gives you many, many more opportunities across many, many more companies.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, it's right. You can have a broader reach because as the industry continues to grow and gets more sophisticated, we're also in need of some of these new jobs, for lack of a better term. Some of these analysts and some of these programmers and all these things.
Yeah,
that
and technology is a big part of every.
When we started, we didn't need any of that.
Yeah, well, my canned line is I say when I started in this industry, the words outdoor and industry didn't ever touch.
Yeah, right. It was yet
the OIA, if you remember, was called ORCA. It was the Outdoor Recreation Coalition. I mean, it was a vastly
Conservation
different beast.
Alliance or something. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And now it's the Outdoor Industry Association, and so we are an industry. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a whole host of technology jobs on top of the sales, marketing, product, finance. So it's an industry.
That's exciting. Yeah. Do you have any daily routines you use to maintain your sanity? You walk the dog or meditate?
Exercise.
Good. Yeah. Excellent.
Try to get about 30 minutes in every day. Otherwise I get a little bit grumpy.
Yep. I'm the same.
30 minutes of exercise and a couple of stiff cups of coffee is my morning routine.
There you go. Perfect. I like it.
Keeps me sane.
Do you have any favorite books or books you give as gifts to folks?
Probably my favorite book to give as a gift is one called The Good Rain by Timothy Egan.
Oh, haven't heard of that.
And the subtitle is it's something like Across Time and Terrain in the Pacific Northwest. And it's this, Tim Egan's the New York Times correspondent for the Northwest. And he retraces a journey done in 1893 over the Cascades.
Oh, cool.
And revisits a lot of the places that were written about in this book from 1893. And really just kind of an interesting portrayal. The book's probably 25 years old at this point, so it'd be almost interesting to do it again given all the changes that have happened. But it's I try to give it to friends who move to the area or just want to learn more about the sogginess that we live with up here in this corner.
That sounds like a good one. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I'll give it to my sister. Great. She just moved up
Easy
there.
read.
Yeah, good. How about a favorite piece of outdoor gear under $100?
Oof. Well, I always think I never go anywhere in the outdoors without two things that you could probably total up and get away with for under 100, which
Cool.
is a pair of gloves. Nothing beats a good pair of kind of durable fleece gloves,
Yep.
and a headlamp. I
Yep. Yep.
figure with those two, I'm generally maybe a Cliff Bar in my back pocket, and I'm generally up for anything.
Yeah, those are good.
Yeah.
The headlamps have come up a lot on the show. That's one of the must-have
Yeah.
items for everybody, I think. Yeah.
I think we've all been stuck in those epic,
Oh my
dark
God. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
adventures that better told over a couple of beers.
Yeah. Trying to do anything in the dark is impossible. So.
Yes.
How about a couple accomplishments that you're most proud of over your career so far? You've got a lot more ahead of you, I think.
Let's hope, right? I think that's a hard one. I think what I'm most proud of is just working with and collaborating with some of the greatest people I've ever known, in an effort to bring some really exciting and innovative products to market over 20 years. I mean, it's been literally thousands of products over the years, and some of them come to mind, but what's almost more important is just thinking through all the people and the processes and the hard work we went through together to deliver those products consistently, season after season after season, to just bring consumers just really outstanding innovation. So.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the outdoor industry, because it doesn't matter if you're in the product side or at retail or in marketing or sales. Those people are everywhere in the industry, and they have all, collaborated together to create all these great things, and that's what makes it such a great industry.
No question. And I'm also really proud of the sustainability work that I've done, and I really put that in the same category as what I just mentioned, meaning, yes, I was there, yes, I was involved, but it's really, particularly in sustainability, people that are a lot smarter than me, really talented experts, who it's great to be a part of that work, bringing some of these standards forward and now seeing them through to their next point of evolution. So super exciting.
So speaking of all these people, who are some of the mentors that have helped you along the way?
Oof. That's a hard one.
Throw
right?
a couple out there.
Because you always leave people.
Yeah, you can leave somebody out. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah.
I mean, I would say a lot of my colleagues at K2. I mean, they were an incredibly generous group. I think back to Brent Turner, Luke Edgar, Haley Martin. They were just inspirational. They knew I was young and fairly untested, and they were there helping to support and encourage, and God, it's been, I mean, that was a great run. And then I would say the same at OR, but I think at OR I'm going to avoid mentioning names because, I mean, the list is long. People I worked for, people who worked for me, people who I worked alongside with.
That's great.
I mean, there were just so many great people. 12 years is a long time.
Yeah. Right,
So I think they all know who they are, and I'm going to avoid mentioning names.
Well, shout out to that whole team. Still, the guys are still there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, really, that was just an incredible experience. I learned so much from so many people, and was excited to be able to pass on a lot of wisdom, and that was great.
Cool. And how about any nonprofit work that you do? You guys work with any nonprofits?
So one of the things I've spent a lot of time doing, because I'm a real believer in helping kind of groom the next generation. I spent about 20 years. I recently stepped back just due to time commitments, but I spent nearly 20 years on the advisory committee for the apparel design program that I did.
Okay.
And what was great about that is I could be the voice of industry and say, here are the things that these students need to be trained in.
Right.
In order to make their way into industry. And in my time there, I feel like I really helped influence the program so much that we were able, when I first started in the industry, probably not as able to hire direct out of that program, and 20
Mm-hmm.
years, and even sooner than 20 years, the program had evolved so much that we were able to bring people in, the day they stepped out of that program. We
Oh,
would
wow,
actually
that's
go,
great.
yeah, we would go to the final portfolio show looking for candidates to hire, because they evolved the program so much. So that was probably the biggest effort, that I'm most proud of over the last 20 years.
Cool.
And I've done a bunch of environmental work, some cleanups, contamination prevention,
Right.
et cetera, local, very hyper local
That's
environmental
great.
stuff. Yeah, which has been great.
Cool. As we wrap up here, is there anything else you'd like to ask of our listeners or say to our listeners?
Well, I think right now what's most exciting to me, and hopefully people are more excited than scared, although there is, definitely a fear factor out there, given the scale of some of these standards. But I think I'm excited, and hopefully everybody else is excited about the opportunity to really lead environmentally going forward. And probably the other thing I would say is, see y'all at the show.
Yeah, awesome. In a couple of weeks, we'll be there. Yeah. How can people reach out to you if they want to follow up by email or...
Probably LinkedIn is best.
Okay. We'll put a link to that. Yeah.
Yeah, those always flow right through to email, and always happy to start a conversation that way. And what I would say to people is don't hesitate to reach out. Obviously I'm running a consulting business, but I really am happy to talk through if people are finding they're having particular problems with the Higg index, or other aspects related to these sustainability standards. I published an article on LinkedIn not long ago, just offering some suggestions for people working on the Higg brand and retail module. So I'm always happy to.
Cool. We'll
talk
put links to those two things in the show notes. That way people can just.
Oh, that sounds great.
Click and follow. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, it's been great catching up again, Ammi.
Yeah, you too, Rick.
Yeah.
This is outstanding. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, indeed.
And we'll have to try to get a couple of, as we talked about, a couple of follow-up episodes with maybe some of the REI folks and maybe some of the, the brand folks that are having to go through this process. That'd be good follow-up episodes.
I think you get some really interesting perspectives from the sustainability team at REI, and any brands that want to talk about their work going through the Higg Index.
Yeah, cool. Awesome. Well, thanks. I'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, Rick. Talk to you soon.
All right, see you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Ammi Borenstein. You can catch up with Ammi via his LinkedIn profile. You find links to everything we discussed in the show notes at theoutdoorbizpodcast.com/episode/146. I would be grateful if you visit iTunes, give us a rating and review, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Outdoor Biz Podcast, and also be sure to share this episode with a friend or tell a friend about it. Thanks for listening. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. I've used Audible for many years now. I'm on the road a lot, and Audible allows me to enjoy the great books I discover or are recommended by friends. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/theoutdoorbizpodcast. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Start your 30-day free trial with Audible today. If you want more of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to go to theoutdoorbizpodcast.com where you find all the episodes, show notes, and much, much more. Until next time, be sure to make time to get outside.